Does America still trust its own democracy, or is something deeper quietly broken since 2020? Tonight, we're asking a question that millions of Americans are already debating at kitchen tables, online forums, and voting booths across the country. According to recent polling, nearly 4 in 10 Americans say they do not believe Joe Biden was legitimately elected president. That number alone should make every citizen pause, because if confidence in elections collapses, what happens next in 2024? For generations, Americans were taught that elections were sacred, not perfect, but trusted. Lose an election and you regroup. Win an election and you govern. But after 2020, that shared understanding fractured. Allegations of fraud, court challenges, recounts, televised hearings, and endless social media battles turned a normal democratic process into a national identity crisis. And tonight, we are not here to tell you what to think. We're here to ask why trust vanished and whether it can be restored. Supporters of former President Donald Trump argue that unanswered questions remain. They point to changes in voting rules during the pandemic, expanded mail-in ballots, and what they describe as a lack of transparency. They say the system moved too fast, changed too much, and ask the public to simply accept the results without explanation. For them, skepticism is not extremism, it's caution. On the other side, President Biden supporters say the 2020 election was the most scrutinized in American history. Dozens of lawsuits failed. Judges appointed by both Republicans and Democrats rejected fraud claims. State officials certified results after recounts. For them, continued doubt isn't healthy skepticism, it's a dangerous refusal to accept reality. So who's right? Or is the real story not about right and wrong, but about trust itself? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Trust doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes slowly. It weakens when institutions stop communicating clearly. It collapses when people feel ignored, talked down to, or dismissed. And many Americans across party lines say that's exactly how they feel. Think about this. If you believe elections are fair, you're more likely to vote. If you believe they're rigged, why bother? That question alone carries enormous consequences for 2024. Lower turnout, more anger, more division, and possibly a result that half the country refuses to accept, no matter who wins. Ask yourself this honestly. If your candidate loses in 2024, will you trust the result, or will you immediately question it? And if your candidate wins, will you care whether the other side trusts it at all? This is not just a political problem, it's a civic one. Election officials warn that democracy doesn't survive on laws alone. It survives on shared belief. The belief that votes are counted honestly, that courts are independent, that losers accept outcomes, even painful ones, because the system is bigger than any single election. Yet right now, that shared belief is cracking. Media plays a role. Partisan outlets often speak to their own audiences, reinforcing fears instead of answering doubts. Social media accelerates outrage, rewarding the loudest voices rather than the most accurate ones. And politicians on both sides often benefit from distrust. Anger mobilizes voters. Fear raises donations. Calm explanations rarely go viral. So where does that leave the average American voter? Confused, frustrated, suspicious. Many voters say they don't know who to believe anymore. Government says trust the system. Critics say question everything, and in between, ordinary citizens are left wondering whether truth even exists or if it's just whichever side shouts louder. As we move closer to 2024, one thing is clear. This election will not just decide a president. It will test whether Americans still believe in the idea of elections themselves. And that raises a question you should think about carefully before this video ends. If democracy depends on trust, and trust is gone, what replaces it? Stay with us, because in the next part, we'll examine what happens when election trust collapses around the world and whether America is closer to that edge than many want to admit. Before we continue, let us know what you think. Do you trust U.S. elections today, or do you believe serious questions remain unanswered? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation isn't just happening in studios, it's happening across the country.
What happens when a nation stops trusting its elections? History gives us unsettling answers, and they are not theoretical. Around the world, when faith in the ballot collapses, instability follows. Protests escalate, institutions weaken, and democracy becomes something people talk about in the past tense. America has long viewed itself as different, a stable democracy, a global example. But the warning signs are familiar. Competing realities, distrust of courts, accusations against election officials, threats against poll workers, and a growing belief that the system only works when our side wins. In recent years, election workers have resigned in record numbers, citing harassment and fear. Some have required police protection simply for doing their jobs. Ask yourself, what does that say about the health of a democracy when counting votes becomes a dangerous profession? Experts warn that once distrust becomes permanent, it's nearly impossible to reverse. Every future election becomes suspect, every result becomes disputed, and every transfer of power becomes a potential flashpoint. Now, consider 2024. The stakes are higher than ever. The rhetoric is sharper, the divisions are deeper, and both sides are preparing their audiences not just to win, but to doubt. Legal teams are ready. Narratives are pre-written. Claims of victory or fraud may appear before votes are even fully counted. That alone should concern every American, regardless of party. Because democracy cannot survive if every loss is labeled illegitimate and every win is viewed as stolen by the other side. This isn't about liking a candidate. It's about whether the rules still matter. Some reform advocates argue that transparency is the key. Clearer audits, better public communication, stronger safeguards. They say rebuilding trust requires sunlight, not silence. Others argue that misinformation must be confronted directly, even if it angers powerful groups. But doing so risks accusations of censorship and bias. There are no easy answers, only difficult choices. And here's the most important point. The future of election trust does not belong solely to politicians, judges, or media organizations. It belongs to voters, to citizens who choose to engage critically or retreat into cynicism. Ask yourself this: when you hear an election claim, do you check sources, or do you instantly share it if it confirms what you already believe? When courts rule against your preferred outcome, do you consider the evidence or dismiss the system entirely? These individual choices, multiplied by millions, shape the future of democracy more than any single election result. As 2024 approaches, America stands at a crossroads. One path leads to a system that, while imperfect, remains functional because people agree to play by the rules. The other leads to endless doubt, permanent conflict, and a nation unable to accept outcomes peacefully. Which path will America choose? That answer won't be decided on Election Day alone. It will be decided in conversations like this one, in classrooms, in homes, in comment sections, and in whether Americans can disagree without destroying the system that allows disagreement in the first place. So before you leave, we want to hear from you. Do you believe America can rebuild trust in its elections? Or has something fundamentally changed since 2020? Comment below, engage respectfully, and stay with us, because this story doesn't end in November. It defines what comes after.